All right, hi class. So I wanted to take this opportunity to record basically a crash course in using HTML and CSS, which you'll need for this week's assignment. We're not going to do anything too um, in depth with HTML and CSS, but we are going to learn a few of the basics and just how to put together a simple web page. So I thought, I mean, there's plenty of resources online, and you can look up like, YouTube videos and web pages that explain a lot of information about HTML and CSS and how to build web pages and things like that. But I thought it made a little more sense just to focus in on just a few of the features that you can use. And so I hope this video will be useful to you. And basically what I'm going to do is just go through and do all the things that the assignment requires. So the intention is basically that you follow along with this video, personalize it a little bit, so make it, unique to yourself, but more or less you follow along with this video, and by the time we're done, you'll have everything you need for your assignment in place already. One of the things you want to do before you go ahead and get started is make sure you've installed a code editor or a text editor. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code, which I think is a really great text editor to get started with. It's designed for this kind of stuff, so it makes it really easy to work with. HTML and CSS. If you don't want to install Visual Studio Code, you can just use like Notepad or TextEdit, which are built into your computers. But I really prefer this tool and encourage you to check it out and install it and just play around with it and see how you like it. So yeah, the first thing you'll need to do is make sure you've installed or opened up a text editor and that you're ready to go. And the second thing you'll need to do is you'll need to create a directory somewhere on your computer. I've created mine, just at this location on my computer. I've created a directory called Webpage. You can name it whatever you want, but inside of this directory, we're going to put all of our files for the assignment. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just I can drag and drop it to open it up in Visual Studio Code. You probably see a message that looks like this, asking you if you trust the author of that file. And of course, I was the author of the file, so I do trust it. Once you have your directory open, you need to create two files. So I'm going to create a new file called index.html. That's going to be my HTML file. And then I'm going to create another file called base.css. And that's going to be where I put my styling information. And then there's one more thing that you'll need. You'll need to display at least one image in your application. You can go online and look for something and download it. By the way, we're building like a web page that describes like a movie or a book or a game or some, TV show or whatever, something we're just going to provide a little review of. So that's kind of the thing we're trying to accomplish with this assignment. I'm going to review this movie right here. So let me just add this file. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, movie that came out about a month ago, I think, late last year. So that's going to be what my review page is going to be about. So I'll just go ahead and open that up, and then we're ready to go. So now that I have these three files in place, and again, you can add like more images and stuff if you want. But you need to have at least one. So I found this image online, and this is what I'm going to use. So let's go over to my index.html page. Okay, so now we're ready to actually build the HTML page. We're going to start by laying out the content of our web page, and then we're going to come back and add some styling information. Okay, so HTML is for just describing what's in your page. The CSS is for describing how it should look. And I'm going to go through these just one by one, just to explain a little bit about them. So every HTML page should start with this tag right here that indicates that it's an HTML document. So just like the first line on every HTML page should just look like this. And then the root element of the document is the HTML element. Okay, so I can just type HTML. And notice how it creates the open and closing tag. So the way HTML works is everything has to be inside of what we call a tag. A tag is something that has these angle brackets around it, and so there's different kinds of tags that mean different things. So here's my main HTML tag. You only have one of these. An opening tag just has angle brackets. A closing tag has this /, and basically what it means is that anything inside of these two tags is the contents of your HTML document. Okay, so you'll notice this pattern as we go. And some tags you need to add attributes to. So I'm going to show you kind of the main things you need to include in a basic HTML page. So one of the recommended things you should have is just a language tag indicating what language this page is in. Sorry, I said tag, but I meant to say attribute. So inside of a tag, you can have like these name equals and then something inside of quotation marks. These are called attributes. So this is the attribute name, which is lang, and then the value of that attribute is enus, which is the name of United States English language. This just tells the web browser what to expect in terms of the language that's being used on the page for things like translation features and stuff like that. Okay, and then the first, once you create the HTML document root, you should have two things. You should have a head, which is going to contain some information about your document, and then a body, which contains the contents of the document itself. Inside of the head, you need to have typically a couple of what we call meta elements. Meta elements just describe, again, more information about the document itself. So we'll have a meta, and in this one we'll have character set equals UTF-8. So this tells the browser what kind of character set it's using. We'll have another one. By the way, this is not typically stuff that you have memorized. It's something that you can look up if you're actually doing web development. Usually there's also this viewport tag, so I'm just gonna type it out here. And again, I'm just showing you like kind of the basic recommended elements to have in a brand new HTML page. Okay, now we have the title. The title is what is going to show up in your browser tab for your web page. Okay, so I'm going to call this one Michael's movie review. Okay, and that's going to be the title of my web page. Again, what the browser will show over here. And the final thing that we're going to need to do in the head of the document is link to our style sheet. So I'm going to create this link attribute, or this link tag. Inside of it, there's an attribute called rel, which describes what kind of link this is. It's a style sheet, so that this is what you use for CSS. And then href indicates the URL where I'm going to find it. Mine is called base.css, so I'm going to call it base.css like this. A // means I'm referencing a file in the local directory, and everything here we're going to do is just in the local directory. So I'll use this is the URL of my style sheet. I can actually click on it and notice how it opens up that file. So now I have my index.html with my head filled out, and then I have nothing in the body yet. Let me just quickly put some text in here. I'll say hello world, and I'll save my document. Okay. Again, there's not much here yet. Most of this is just meta information and stuff that you wouldn't see when you open the web page. But let's go ahead and open it and just see what's there. So I'm going to copy the path of this file, which again is just stored on my computer in some directory somewhere. And then the other thing you'll want to do is open a browser in incognito or in private mode. You always want to use like the incognito mode when you're doing web development, so that you don't have to mess with things like the cache and cookies and other kinds of stuff. So anyway, I'll paste the file location of this document right here and click enter, and it's actually now opened this file. So you can see that the browser tab is showing me Michael's movie review, which was the title of my web page, which I put inside of this title HTML element right here. I have an opening and closing tag around it. All right, so that's the title that shows up here. And then inside of the body, remember how I told you this is everything that shows up in the actual document itself. And all I have right now is just the text hello world. And so that's what we're seeing right here. Okay. Now I've gone quickly through a lot of this, and I didn't really explain what a lot of these things were in detail. But this is like the very basic setup for an HTML page. You kind of need, or it's recommended to have all of these things: the language attribute, the doc type, header, these two meta attributes are just part of like every web page that describe some basic features to the browser for modern web pages. Title, again, we saw how that's what shows up over here, and then link, which actually loads the style sheet so that it's also part of this web page when it's shown in the browser. Now there's nothing in here yet, but there will be eventually, and we'll see how those styles show up in our web page, and that's because we've included them here. So go ahead and use this basic layout to get started, with your web page, and then we'll go ahead and fill out some of the contents inside of the body. Another couple quick notes: you'll notice that most attributes have an open and close tag. So the open tag, again, is just an angle brackets, optionally containing some attributes as well, which are the word equals and then some text inside of quotation marks. So here, for example, we have head, open, and close tag. The close tag is always indicated by a /. There are some HTML elements which don't need a closing tag, so they don't have any contents inside of them. So like meta elements, link elements, there's no open close. It looks like just an open tag, but that's all it is. There is no closing tag needed. So we see meta, we see link. There's another one we're going to use called image and also BR. So I'll show you those when we get to them. So there's the handful that don't have closing tags, but most of them you need an open and closing tag, and then there's some kind of contents inside of those elements. So again, here's the structure of a basic page. All right, so now let's go ahead and start to create our movie review. So one of the things the assignment is going to ask you for is to have a header using an H1 tag. So H1, you're going to create an open close tag, and then you're going to type out your page header. So in this case, I'll use the title of the movie that I'm reviewing. Okay. The next thing that we'll want to do is include our image. By the way, let me just save this and refresh it so you can see. So now the contents of my body just changed, and we can see this header now over here. The next thing I'd like to do is include this image. So I'll include an image tag. This is, again, one of those that doesn't have a closing tag. It's just a single HTML element with no children elements inside of it. So there are a couple of attributes that we're going to need. Actually, there's several. So I'll start with source, which should be the URL of my image. And since it's in my local directory, I'll just reference it like this: poster.webp. That's the type of image that it is. You might have a JPEG or a PNG or whatever. But yeah, just make sure you refer to it by name. And then alt text is you're supposed to describe what the picture is of. So I'll just type out this. So Puss in Boots: The Last Wish movie poster, that's what it is. Then another thing that you should typically do, I'll open up this image and I can see down here the width and height in pixels. You should, so it's 1170 by 614. It's always good practice to say width equals 1170 and height equals 614. So you describe to the browser what the width and height of the actual image are. So the browser knows how much space to save for it once it loads. So if I go ahead and save that now, you can see that here's the image. Now you'll notice right away how, things aren't going to look too great. This is too big, and this text is, in a weird, not the best font, I don't think. So we'll be improving this when we get to style. For now, we're just describing the contents of our page. So we're not going to worry too much about styling yet. All right. The next thing that you need is a few paragraphs describing the contents of your review, essentially. And so I asked you to, and I'll just copy and paste those so you don't have to watch me type them all out. But I asked you to have 3 different paragraphs. Paragraphs are, you can indicate that using the P tag, and there's an open close tag. So here's, if I kind of expand this window for a moment here, we can kind of see how here's my open tag right here, and if we scroll all the way over here, here's the close tag. And I have 3 of these. I have the first paragraph, which describes context or background, the second paragraph, which describes sort of the plot synopsis, and then the third paragraph, which is your personal commentary on the media that you're reviewing. So there's my third paragraph. It's a bit longer. Here's the closing tag. So notice how all of those have open close tags. Okay. And then I also asked that each paragraph have its own heading. So I have this H2 element in here. H2 indicates a level 2 heading. So, you usually have one level 1 heading at the top of your page, and then subheadings in the document are H2 headings, and so on and so forth. So we see I've just given the heading of background, plot synopsis, and personal commentary. All right, so if I save this and refresh, you can see that text showing up here. So here's my H2 headings, right? And then here's the text for what I've written out. Another thing that you'll notice is this BR tag. This just means add a space. So this is how I'm putting an extra space between paragraphs. So you can see that, each paragraph is kind of separated by an extra space from the following paragraph. And that's what BR does. So again, a really basic set of HTML elements. There's, dozens upon dozens of different elements that you can learn about and do things with. So I'm just going to use these for now, though. And that's basically the full contents of my page at this point. I don't really have much else to add. I've covered all the things that I'm supposed to cover according to the assignment. Oh, one other thing that I didn't mention was notice I have an anchor tag right here. So right in the middle of my first paragraph, I have a link to, and I'll just highlight that part right here. I have a link to DreamWorks Animation Studios. And so I'm inside of my paragraph. I'm right in the middle of typing out some text, and wrapped around the words I want to be part of the link, I have an A tag. And notice here's the opening part of the tag, and then over here's the closing tag. Okay. Inside of this anchor tag, we have the href, which again is supposed to be a URL, right? So here is the link to dreamworks.com, their website. And so that's how you add a link to your web document. You have to put it inside of an anchor tag with an href to the actual URL it links to, and then the text inside of that anchor tag is what will become the text that you can click on. All right, so if I come over here and click on DreamWorks Animation Studios, notice how that text has that blue link color. If I click on it, it'll actually open up that their actual website in the browser. So let me go back now, and actually let me shrink this title bar here so we can see a little bit more of our web page. So yeah, you have to have an H1 heading, you have to have an image, you have to have 3 paragraphs, each with their own title, and you also have to hyperlink. You have to have a hyperlink somewhere. And that basically covers all the content requirements for your assignment. So we've got all of those things here now. So that's good. The last thing left to do now is to add some styling. So let me show you how to do that. So you'll notice that this is really not very good looking. It looks, things are kind of spaced weird. I don't really like the font. The picture is huge compared to everything else. So the next steps that I'm going to do is going to just make it look a little bit better. And that's what CSS is for. So let's come over to our CSS. And remember, we already included our CSS with this link right here. So it's actually part of our web page when it loads already. So I can make changes in here and refresh the page, and you will see those changes each time, just like we were doing before. So first thing I want to do is I just happen to know that browsers add a bunch of styling by default to get this kind of generic look and feel. So one of the things they do is add margins to everything. So I'm going to show you a trick to just remove margins from everything. So I can say, I can type out, whenever you have CSS, there's like three components. There's the sort of the identifier of the thing that you're writing styles for. And you'll see several examples as we go. This first one I've used is just the asterisk character, which means everything in the document. And then you have open and close curly braces, in between which you have a set of style commands. Okay. And so I'm saying for all the elements, all the different HTML elements in this document, I want to set the margin to 0. So usually you have the command has some word which describes the thing you're referring to, and then a colon, and then a value, and then a semicolon. That's kind of the structure of a CSS rule. So again, for all the elements of my page, I'll apply the following styles. In this case, there's just one where I take the margins and I set their value to 0. If I reload my page now, you'll notice that everything kind of squishes together because the margins are gone. All right, and that's what I wanted to do. Another thing I really don't like is the font. So I'm going to come down to, here's another identifier that you can use. I'm going to say body. So this will refer to everything inside of the HTML body. So remember, body is one of our tags. So everything inside of the HTML body, I'm going to set the font family, and then I'm just going to come down and choose, there's a few options. You can basically just name the font that you want it to use, or a series of fonts that it should use. It'll always start with the first one, and if it doesn't find it on the computer, it will go to the next one, and so on and so forth. So that's why you see a lot of these like lists of fonts. I'm going to choose this one because I kind of like it. So it's gonna, look for this font on my computer. If it doesn't find it, it will move on to this font. If it doesn't find it, it will move on to this one, and so on and so forth. If it doesn't find any of them, it'll just use like the generic sans serif font. Anyway, so I'm changing the font family, or the font that's being used to render my page for every for every element inside the body. So let me save this and refresh, and notice how the font is changed to this more kind of bold, without the serifs, without the what do you call those? Are those called serifs? Without the little things on the letters. Anyway, so here's my new font that I like just a little bit better. So I've removed margins for everything. I've changed the font for everything inside of the body, and it's already looking a little bit better. Okay. So the next thing I'd like to do is I'd like to change some of these elements specifically. I'd like to, first of all, change this header so that it has kind of a unique style. And so I want to be able to refer to an element directly, rather than just by its generic HTML element name. So for example, I want to refer to this specific header, which describes the title of my movie. So one thing you can do with CSS is you can give an element an identifier. Okay, so if you add the attribute ID equals, and then you give it a name, in this case I'll call it page header. You can name it whatever you want. So I'm adding a new attribute to this open tag. The attribute is ID. ID stands for identifier. I'm calling that identifier page header. If I add this identifier to my page header, which is this whole text right here, and then go over to CSS, I can actually say, I can indicate that I'm referring to that specific element like this. So I have the pound symbol and then the name of the identifier. Okay, so this will set styles for just this one specific element with this identifier. All right, so I'll do this for the rest of what I want to do. So I'll say background. I'll say background instead of background color, and I'll just use RGB 250. I've already chosen a color I kind of like. So it's gonna be kind of this gold color. So I'm gonna describe a RGB color here using the red, green, and blue values. Okay. And if I save this and refresh my page, notice how suddenly that title page header element in my web page has now taken on this kind of cool gold colored background. Okay, now I'd like to also make this a little bit bigger and have more space around it. So I'm also going to add a padding style, and I'm going to just use 1 EM as the size of it. Again, I know I'm using a lot of like lingo and stuff that you're probably not familiar with. These are things that, you learn as you go and you look up, and like you can describe how many pixels of padding you want, or how many EM stands for elements. And, we could go into all the nitty-gritty details of all these different things, but I'm just showing you some basics, and you can kind of build on top of that. Or just copy what I have and just slightly change it. Either way is fine. Another thing I'd like to do is I'd like to take the rest of the content, so everything outside of that H1 header, and I'd like to put a little bit of padding just like I did around the header, but I'd like to put a little bit of white space padding around the rest of the document. So I need to grab all of these elements and put them inside of another element so that I can do that. So I'm going to create what's called a main section of my web page. Main is used to describe, as the name sounds, the main content of your page. So let me just format this a little bit. So yeah, I've now created a main, notice the open and close tag kind of section of my document, and I've put everything else inside of that. I'm going to give this an ID, and I'm going to call this main content. Okay, so giving it an identifier allows me to directly reference it in CSS. So if I come down in CSS and say, okay, here are styles for my main content, and I'm just going to add a padding of 1 EM. Okay, if I do that, we will see a little bit of a spacing has been added around this now. All right, so that's cool. Looking better and better at every step. The last thing I want to do is I want to make this image. It's way too big, so I want to make it much more reasonably sized. So let me go ahead and give that image an identifier as well. So I'll say this is my, I'll call it banner image. All right. Just cleaning up this a little bit. So yeah, my image is identified by this name of banner image. So let me come down here now and refer to it as such. So I'll set styles for that specific HTML element that's called banner image, which happens to be this image right here. Okay. And so I'm going to set a few styles here. The first thing, let's see, what am I going to do? Let's see. I want to set the display to block. I would like to set the margin to auto. I would like to set the width to 80% of my web page width, and the height to auto. This is going to basically allow the image to be centered in the middle of the screen, only take up 80% of my browser's width, and by setting height to auto, it'll maintain its original aspect ratio, so the height will change to adjust, will adjust so that it matches the width. You'll see what I mean. So let me refresh the page, and there we go. It's now much smaller. It's filling 80% of my web page width. The height has adjusted to maintain the same aspect ratio. And you'll notice if I take my browser and I make it bigger, you'll notice how that grows and shrinks just to match those width and height requirements. All right. So here's my web page. I think it looks a lot better now than what it did before. So I'm actually pretty happy with this. I think I might add one more BR right here, just to add a little space below the image. There we go. So I'm going to leave it at this. I think I've shown you enough of the basics to get your assignment done. So you can essentially, follow along and copy what I have. I'd like you to change it a little bit so it doesn't look exactly like what I have. Like hopefully you'll choose something else besides this specific movie to talk about. But yeah, change your styles a little bit, play around with this, maybe, look into something, do some research and see if you can do something cool or creative. It doesn't have to be too much beyond what we have here, but just just personalize it to yourself, right? So yeah, once you've got all of these things done, that's more or less what you need to do for your assignment. And then the last step really quick, I'll just show you. Let me get back over here to my file explorer. Once you have everything, kind of completed and you're happy with what you have, again, you have a folder with some content inside of it. And so this is my folder right here, and you just need to zip up that into a zip archive, and this is what you're going to upload to submit your assignment. Okay, so yeah, once you're done with everything, create the zip archive and upload that to complete your assignment. All right, thanks everyone. I hope this tutorial was helpful. Do let me know if you have any feedback or questions, and I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.